Jack Thompson crouched low, his eyes scanning the dense underbrush of the Appalachian forest. A soft breeze rustled the leaves around him, but Jack remained still, his breathing slow and controlled. His ghillie suit blended seamlessly with the foliage, making him nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Beside him, his grandchildren, Ethan and Lily, mimicked his every move. They had been practicing for years, but today's lesson was different. Today, Jack wanted to teach them more than just the art of camouflage. He wanted them to understand the patience and intuition that made a sniper more than just a skilled marksman. "Remember," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. "It's not about the shot. It's about waiting for the right moment, knowing when to move and when to stay perfectly still." Ethan nodded, his young face set with concentration. Lily, just a year younger but no less determined, kept her eyes fixed on the forest floor. They had heard their grandfather's stories 1,000 times, tales of battles fought in distant lands, of enemies outsmarted, and lives saved. But out here, in the quiet of the forest, those stories seemed distant and almost unreal. This was their home, a place of peace, not conflict. The thought of danger here seemed almost impossible. Then, a low rumble disrupted the tranquility, a sound that didn't belong to the forest. Jack's muscles tensed instinctively, his hand motioning for Ethan and Lily to stay down. The noise grew louder, a mechanical growl that sent birds scattering from the treetops. Jack's eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. Through the gaps in the trees, he saw it, an alien craft descending, sleek and angular, its surface glinting ominously in the sunlight. "Get down!" Jack hissed, pushing Ethan and Lily flat against the ground. They obeyed without question, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. The craft landed in a clearing not far from them, its engines winding down with a high-pitched whine. Jack motioned for his grandchildren to stay hidden, his hand hovering over the knife strapped to his side. He hadn't carried a rifle in years, not since he retired from the military, but he knew he would need more than a blade against whatever was inside that ship. The hatch opened with a hiss, and a group of alien warriors emerged. They were tall, with sleek, metallic armor that seemed to shift colors as they moved. Their eyes glowed an unnatural shade of green, scanning the forest with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Jack watched them carefully, noting the advanced weaponry slung across their backs and the strange devices attached to their wrists. "They think they're invisible," Jack muttered to himself, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had seen that look before, in enemy soldiers who underestimated their opponents. These aliens, with their advanced technology and superior attitude, had no idea what they were walking into. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered, "what do we do?" Jack's mind raced. He needed to get his grandchildren to safety, but he also needed to learn more about these invaders. They had chosen this spot for a reason, and he needed to know why. "We wait," he said softly, "and we watch. Let them make the first move." The aliens moved with precision, spreading out in a calculated formation, their eyes sweeping over the terrain. One of them, seemingly the leader, stepped forward and spoke in a guttural language that Jack couldn't understand. But he didn't need to know the words to recognize the tone: contempt, derision, and a hint of amusement. They were mocking Earth's primitive ways, confident in their superior vision and technology. Jack's grip tightened on his knife. He knew he couldn't take them all on, not head to head, but he didn't need to. He had something they didn't, an intimate knowledge of this land and the patience to use it. "Stay low and follow my lead," he whispered to Ethan and Lily. "We're going to show them what human camouflage is really about." Moving slowly, Jack guided his grandchildren deeper into the forest, every step deliberate, every rustle of leaves a potential giveaway. They moved like shadows, slipping through the underbrush, avoiding dry twigs and loose stones. Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the familiar adrenaline rush of being hunted. But this time, he wasn't just a sniper, he was a teacher, and his students' lives depended on every move he made. They reached a small ridge overlooking the clearing. From here, they could see the aliens more clearly. The leader was examining the ground, his expression one of growing frustration. Jack felt a grim satisfaction. They were starting to realize that their technology wasn't infallible, that in this dense forest, human ingenuity could match their advanced optics. "Remember," Jack whispered, his eyes never leaving the aliens. "It's not about what you see, but what you don't see. Let them think they're in control, let them feel safe. That's when you strike." As if on cue, one of the aliens stepped into a snare Jack had set earlier, a crude but effective trap made of thin wire and a bent sapling. The alien was yanked off its feet, hanging upside down, its weapon clattering to the ground. The leader barked an order, and the others rushed to help, their formation breaking, their confidence shaken. Jack allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He could see the doubt creeping into their movements, the uncertainty in their eyes. They were no longer the arrogant invaders, but confused hunters in an unfamiliar forest. And that was exactly where Jack wanted them. "Stay calm," he whispered to Ethan and Lily. "This is just the beginning. We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot in these woods." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Jack felt a sense of determination settle over him. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had a chance, slim as it might be. And sometimes, a chance was all you needed. He glanced at his grandchildren, their eyes fixed on the aliens below. They were scared, yes, but they were also ready. Ready to learn, ready to fight, ready to defend their home. Jack nodded to himself. This was their land, their forest. And they would defend it with everything they had. "Let's give them a lesson they'll never forget," he said quietly. And with that, the hunt began. The forest was unnaturally quiet. Jack could feel the tension in the air, like a coiled spring ready to snap. His eyes darted between the trees, his senses sharp, his instincts honed by years of experience. Beside him, Ethan and Lily crouched low, their faces set in determined concentration. They were following his lead, learning to read the subtle signs in the forest, to sense the presence of the enemy before seeing them. The aliens were moving cautiously now, their earlier confidence replaced by a wary vigilance. Jack could see them through the gaps in the foliage, their movements precise but strained, their eyes sweeping the terrain. They were searching, but for the first time, they weren't sure what they were looking for. "Grandpa," Lily whispered, her voice barely a breath. "What are they doing?" "They're trying to figure us out," Jack replied softly. "They've never been in a place like this before. They're used to fighting in open spaces, using their technology to give them an edge. Here, they don't have that advantage. The forest is on our side." Ethan nodded, his eyes locked on the aliens. "So what do we do next?" Jack smiled slightly. "We make them doubt. We make them afraid. And then we strike." He motioned for them to follow, leading them deeper into the forest. The terrain grew rougher, the underbrush thicker, providing more cover. Jack moved with a quiet confidence, his steps sure and silent. Ethan and Lily mirrored his movements, careful to avoid stepping on dry leaves or snapping twigs. Every sound, every rustle could give them away, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. As they crept through the shadows, Jack's mind was racing. He needed to stay one step ahead of the aliens, to anticipate their next move. He knew they would be adjusting their tactics, trying to use their technology to flush them out. He had to keep them guessing, keep them off balance. They reached a small stream, its water flowing gently over smooth stones. Jack paused, crouching low behind a fallen log. He studied the area, noting the dense thicket on the other side and the steep hill that rose behind it. It was a perfect spot for an ambush. "We're going to set a trap," Jack whispered. "Ethan, I want you to take this rope and tie it across the stream, low to the ground. Make sure it's tight. Lily, you'll help me gather some branches and leaves. We're going to create a blind here, make it look like part of the forest." They moved quickly but carefully, each action deliberate, each movement calculated. Ethan tied the rope taut, hiding it beneath the water's surface. Lily and Jack piled branches and leaves against the log, creating a natural-looking barrier that would conceal their position. The minutes ticked by, the forest around them still and silent, as if holding its breath. Jack could feel his pulse quickening, the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was what he had trained for, what he had spent a lifetime perfecting. The waiting, the watching, the anticipation of the perfect moment to strike. The aliens appeared at the edge of the clearing, their figures ghostly in the dappled sunlight. They moved slowly, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning the area. Jack watched them closely, his breath shallow and steady. He could see the tension in their movements, the uncertainty in their eyes. They were on edge, wary of every shadow, every sound. One of the aliens stepped forward, its foot catching on the hidden rope. It stumbled, falling hard to the ground, its weapon skidding out of reach. The others reacted instantly, raising their guns, their eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Now!" Jack whispered sharply. Ethan and Lily sprang into action, hurling stones and sticks at the aliens, creating a cacophony of noise and chaos. The aliens fired blindly into the forest, their shots wild and uncontrolled. Jack took advantage of the distraction, slipping around the side of the clearing, moving like a shadow through the trees. He reached the edge of the thicket, crouching low behind a boulder. He could see the alien leader barking orders, trying to regain control. But it was too late. The trap had worked. They were rattled, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, a fierce satisfaction burning in his veins. They had done it. They had made the enemy doubt, made them afraid. And now they had the upper hand. "Hold your fire," Jack called softly to Ethan and Lily. "Let's see what they do next." The aliens regrouped, their eyes scanning the forest with a mix of fear and frustration. They were clearly unused to this kind of warfare, to an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Jack could sense their desperation, their growing realization that they were out of their depth. He felt a surge of pride as he glanced at his grandchildren. They were calm and focused, their eyes sharp, their movements controlled. They were ready for whatever came next. "Stay alert," Jack whispered. "This isn't over yet. We've got them on the run, but they're not going to give up easily." The tension in the air was palpable, every breath tight with anticipation. Jack could feel the weight of the moment, the stakes higher than ever. They were playing a dangerous game, but it was a game he knew well. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Jack made a decision. They would push the aliens further, drive them deeper into the woods, where their technology would be even less effective. It was a risky move, but one that could turn the tide for good. He signaled to Ethan and Lily, a silent command to prepare for the next phase. They nodded, their expressions serious, their resolve unbreakable. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The hunt was far from over, but he was ready. They all were. Together, they would face whatever came next, and they would do it on their terms. "Let's move," he said quietly, his voice steady and strong. And with that, they disappeared into the forest once more, shadows in the fading light, ready for the next battle. The smell of smoke filled the air, thick and acrid, clawing at Jack's throat. The aliens had set the forest ablaze in their desperation, hoping to flush out the humans hiding in its shadows. Flames licked at the underbrush, the crackle of burning leaves and snapping branches echoing through the trees. Jack crouched low behind a large rock, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene before him. This was a move he hadn't anticipated, a reckless gambit that threatened to destroy everything in its path. "Stay low," Jack whispered to Ethan and Lily, his voice tense but controlled. "We're not out of this yet." Ethan's face was streaked with soot, his eyes wide but focused. "What do we do, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the roar of the fire. Jack's mind raced, calculating their options. The fire was spreading fast, driven by the wind and dry foliage. They couldn't stay here, but they also couldn't afford to reveal themselves. The aliens were still out there, watching, waiting for any sign of movement. Jack knew they had to turn this disaster to their advantage, to use the smoke and confusion as cover. "We move closer to the fire," Jack said, making a swift decision. "The smoke will hide us from their sensors. We use it to get into position for a final strike." Lily's eyes flickered with fear, but she nodded, trusting her grandfather's judgment. Jack felt a surge of pride. They were scared, but they were ready. Ready to fight, to defend their home, no matter the cost. They crept forward, staying low to the ground, their movements slow and deliberate. The smoke stung Jack's eyes, but he kept moving, his focus unwavering. He could hear the distant shouts of the aliens, their voices strained, their formation disrupted by the spreading flames. They were losing control, their careful tactics unraveling in the face of nature's fury. As they neared the edge of the fire, Jack signaled for Ethan and Lily to stop. He scanned the area, searching for the best place to strike. The heat was intense, waves of it radiating from the burning trees, but the smoke was thicker here, obscuring their movements. It was dangerous, but it was also their best chance. There, Jack said, pointing to a cluster of boulders just beyond the flames. We take cover there and wait for them to come through. They'll be blinded by the smoke, won't see us until it's too late. They moved quickly, darting between the trees, their steps light and careful. Jack could feel the heat on his face, the sweat trickling down his neck. The fire was a roaring inferno now, consuming everything in its path. But Jack didn't flinch. He had faced worse than this in his time, and he knew that fear could be an ally if you learned to harness it. They reached the boulders and crouched low, waiting. The minutes dragged on, each one a lifetime as the fire crept closer, the smoke growing thicker. Jack kept his eyes on the flames, his ears tuned to every sound. He could hear the aliens moving through the forest, their footsteps heavy, their voices agitated. They were close, too close. Then, through the haze of smoke, Jack saw movement. The aliens, their forms distorted by the heat waves, were advancing cautiously, their weapons raised. They were disoriented, their sensors useless in the dense smoke. Jack's grip tightened on his knife. This was it. Their moment. Wait, he whispered to Ethan and Lily, holding up a hand. Wait until they're right on top of us. Then we hit them hard and fast. Ethan and Lily nodded, their faces set with determination. They were ready. Jack could see it in their eyes. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment when everything they had learned would be put to the test. The aliens drew closer, their figures looming through the smoke. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a countdown to the inevitable clash. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins, sharpening his senses, heightening his focus. The world narrowed to a single point, to the space between him and the enemy. And then, with a sudden burst of movement, Jack sprang from his hiding place, launching himself at the nearest alien. His knife flashed in the firelight, a quick, deadly arc. The alien staggered back, a look of shock and pain on its face as it crumpled to the ground. Ethan and Lily followed his lead, attacking with a ferocity that took the aliens by surprise. The fight was brief but brutal, a whirlwind of movement and noise. Jack moved with a precision born of years of experience, every strike calculated, every move purposeful. Ethan and Lily were right there with him, their actions swift and coordinated. They fought as one, a seamless unit bound by purpose and necessity. The aliens, caught off guard and blinded by the smoke, fell quickly, their advanced weapons useless in the close quarters. Jack could see the fear in their eyes, the dawning realization that they had underestimated their opponents. They had come to conquer, but they had found something they hadn't expected: resistance, determination, and the will to fight back. As the last of the aliens fell, Jack paused, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the area for any remaining threats. The fire still raged around them, but they had made their stand. They had turned the enemy's desperation against them, used their own fear as a weapon. Jack looked at Ethan and Lily, their faces streaked with soot and sweat, but their eyes bright with victory. He felt a swell of pride, a deep, abiding respect for their courage and resilience. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice hoarse but filled with triumph. Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We're not done yet," he replied, his tone serious but warm. "The fire's still burning, and there might be more out there. Stay sharp." They moved away from the boulders, back into the smoke and shadows, their senses on high alert. The battle wasn't over, but they had won this round. And as long as they stayed together, as long as they used the land to their advantage, they knew they could win the next. Jack led the way, his mind already planning their next move. The fire was both a threat and an opportunity, and he intended to use it to its fullest. They would keep pushing, keep fighting, until the last alien was driven from their home. The forest was their ally, and they would defend it to the end. As they disappeared into the smoke, the fire crackling around them, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The aliens had made a grave mistake in underestimating them. They would soon learn that humans were not so easily defeated. And with that thought, Jack pressed on, ready for whatever lay ahead. The night had deepened, but the forest remained ablaze with an eerie glow. The fire's relentless advance cast flickering shadows across the trees, creating a battlefield painted in hues of orange and black. Jack could feel the heat radiating against his skin, but his mind was focused, his senses attuned to every sound, every movement in the dark. "We need to end this," he said, his voice firm yet quiet. "The fire won't hold them back forever. We have to make our move now." Ethan and Lily nodded, their faces set with determination. They had come this far together, learning and fighting by Jack's side. Fear was a constant presence, but it no longer controlled them. Instead, it sharpened their resolve. "What's the plan, Grandpa?" Ethan asked, gripping his makeshift weapon tighter. Jack glanced around, assessing their surroundings. The fire had driven the aliens into a narrow ravine, a natural choke point. It was perfect for a final stand. If they could lure the remaining aliens into the ravine, they could trap them there, using the fire and the terrain to their advantage. "We draw them in," Jack said, pointing towards the ravine. "Once they're committed, we block their escape and hit them from above. We need to use the high ground. They won't be able to maneuver, and their technology won't help them in such close quarters." Lily's eyes followed Jack's finger, understanding dawning on her face. "We're going to ambush them, just like you taught us," she murmured. Jack nodded, a grim smile on his lips. "Exactly. They won't see it coming." They moved quickly and silently, using the smoke and darkness as cover. Jack could hear the faint sounds of the aliens regrouping, their voices tense, their movements hurried. They were on edge, their confidence eroded by the unfamiliar environment and relentless resistance. It was the perfect time to strike. As they reached the edge of the ravine, Jack motioned for Ethan and Lily to take their positions. The rocks above provided ample cover, and from there, they could rain down whatever they had left, stones, sticks, anything that could disrupt and disorient the aliens. "Stay low," Jack whispered. "Wait for my signal. We need them all inside the ravine before we spring the trap." The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they lay in wait. The fire crackled and roared, sending up showers of sparks that illuminated the night. Jack could feel his pulse in his ears, each beat a reminder of what was at stake. He glanced at Ethan and Lily, their faces resolute, their eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. They were ready. They were his family, and they were ready to defend their home with everything they had. A sudden rustling in the underbrush below signaled the approach of the alien squad. Jack's muscles tensed, every sense focused on the approaching danger. He could see the aliens now, their forms ghostly in the smoke, their weapons at the ready. They moved cautiously, unaware of the trap that awaited them. "Hold," Jack whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. The aliens entered the ravine, one by one, their attention forward, searching for threats that lay in front, not above. When the last alien stepped into the narrow space, Jack gave the signal. Ethan and Lily unleashed a barrage of stones and debris, the sudden onslaught taking the aliens completely by surprise. Cries of confusion and anger filled the air as the aliens stumbled, their formation collapsing in the confined space. Jack leaped down from his perch, landing with a grunt, his knife ready. He moved with a fluid grace, every motion deliberate and controlled. The first alien barely had time to react before Jack's blade found its mark, dropping it to the ground. Ethan and Lily followed suit, using the high ground to their advantage, their attacks precise and devastating. The ravine echoed with the sounds of battle, shouts, clashes, the snap of breaking bones. Jack fought with a ferocity born of desperation, each strike calculated to maximize damage. He could feel the strain in his muscles, the burning in his lungs, but he pushed through the pain. This was it. This was the moment they had been fighting for. Ethan moved like a shadow, his smaller size allowing him to dart between the aliens, striking at their vulnerable points. Lily, perched on a rock above, hurled stones with deadly accuracy, each impact throwing their enemies into further disarray. Together they were an unstoppable force, a well-oiled machine driven by purpose and resolve. The aliens, disoriented and unable to retreat, began to panic. Their advanced technology, so formidable in open battle, was useless here, in the tight confines of the ravine. They were fighting blind, their every move countered by the humans who knew the terrain far better than they ever could. Jack's knife flashed in the dim light as he engaged the alien leader, the one who had mocked them earlier. There was no arrogance in its eyes now, only fear and desperation. It lunged forward with a wild swing, but Jack sidestepped easily, his own counterattack swift and lethal. The leader fell, its weapon clattering to the ground. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the crackling fire and the labored breathing of the combatants. Then, slowly, the remaining aliens began to retreat, backing away, their will to fight broken. "Let them go," Jack said, his voice steady. "They're beaten. They won't be back." Ethan and Lily lowered their weapons, their chests heaving with exertion. They exchanged a glance, a shared look of relief and triumph. They had done it. They had defended their home, fought off the invaders, and won. Jack took a deep breath, letting the tension drain from his body. He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. They had fought as a family, as a community, and they had emerged victorious. He turned to Ethan and Lily, his expression softening. "You did good," he said quietly. "Both of you. I'm proud of you." Lily smiled, a tired but genuine grin. "We couldn't have done it without you, Grandpa." Jack nodded, his heart swelling with pride. They had come through this trial stronger, more united than ever before. The forest had tested them, and they had proven their worth. As the first light of dawn began to break through the smoke, casting a soft glow over the ravine, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had faced the worst and had come out on the other side. The fire still burned, but it would soon die down, and the forest would heal. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders, guiding them back towards the edge of the ravine. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." And together they walked away from the battleground, towards the rising sun, ready to face whatever came next with renewed strength and determination.